Hi, sweeties. How are you doing? Welcome to Naya Sim. Thank you so much for the support. Hope you all are doing great. So I came across this beautiful sister's video, and you all know how brilliant her videos are. And this one also did not shock me, right? So why did she was like, talking, and she was like talking how come like all of a sudden there are like, there are white Caucasians, and because there are no white Caucasians in the Bible and all that. And so she also talked about Gaza and how, when people talk about Gaza, Palestine, and all that, how when you talk about Gaza, the only thing you see, and this is absolutely true, the only thing you see is just the white looking Palestinians or the Gazans. How come you rarely see the people that because like each land, there are indigenous people to the land, which should be people at the Afros, people that look like me. But you don't get to see that. And this is something that I've been wanting to, like, I know it already because, like, I remember a video Sister Crystal Black talked about that how come that in Palestine that there is what they call people that look like me, that is the Abib, right? And she said, why is it that it is only this face that we see when they talk about Gaza? Why is it that people that look like me are not always at the forefront? And how do they treat people that look like me there? You know what? Let's get into this video.
Now, this is my disclaimer. This is a forewarning for the frazzled. If you have ADHD and you can't hang with a conversation that's longer than TikTok, this TikTok video message is not for you. And this is not a microwave meal. No, this is a slow roasted revelation, because what I'm about to unpack is not just information, baby, it's a demolition. See, we're about to dismantle the lie, the biggest, boldest, most manipulative mechanism of control ever manufactured. And guess what that is? Race. Yeah, I know some of you are going to say, well, sis, you use the same terms, black and white, all the time. And you're absolutely right. But let me clarify, I use those terms not because they're true, but because y'all still speak in the matrix. See, the matrix trained you to speak in colors and not with covenants. See, you see skin instead of seeing sin. You see a filter of truth through phenotype instead of prophecy. But now we're about to pull the plug. Are you ready? See, I was compelled to put this message together because so many of you are stuck, glued on the great genetic gimmick that Satan and his rebellious regime concocted. And yes, I said Satan, but don't get it twisted. That name, that's just a title. The true enemy is the fallen sons of God, the divine defector, the spiritual insurgents, including Lucifer, who declared war on the Most High Yah by contaminating his creation. And let's take this all the way back to the Tower of Babel, back to the sons of Japheth, Noah's deeply melanated, did y'all hear that? Melanated lineage, who after the divine judgment, they migrated from Africa to colder climates. And what did they encounter there? Well, isolation, mutation, disobedience, recessive genes. They got bottlenecked genetically and spiritually. And in that exile, guess what? They bred not just with Neanderthals, but with the Watchers, the fallen ones, the very beings that Genesis 6 warned us about. And here's where it gets diabolical. They didn't hide it. No, they actually bragged about it. They called themselves blue blood, as if their pale skin was a badge of divinity. Royalty through inbreeding, not righteousness. A perverse priesthood claiming dominion through degeneration. And from that poisoned bloodline, they built thrones. But thrones not built on truth, but built on the backs of black bodies, biblical theft, and Babylonian blood contract. So don't come at me crying color doesn't matter when the entire world system was built on bleaching the book and replacing the chosen. But let's be clear. This deception isn't just accidental, it's architectural. This is why race was chosen as the mask, because it hides what's really at stake. Bloodlines, birthrights, and biblical authority. And if you still think this is about skin color, baby, you're playing checkers in a chess match designed by celestial traders. Now buckle up, Buttercup, because the next part, we're diving into hybrids, heavenly betrayal, and how the world got hijacked by beings who look human but never carried Yah's breath. Isn't it strange how people with the most power always seem to play the victim the loudest? How is it that the ones scripting society stories sit at the top of every network, every bank, and every boardroom, and yet no one dares question their grip on the narrative? Let me ask you this. Have you ever held on to truth so tightly only to realize that it was nothing but tradition dressed up in theology and propaganda? Have you ever dared to question the script only to feel like a traitor to your own faith, your people, and your own upbringing just because something deep in your spirit whispered, this just doesn't sit right? We're trained to look for evil in the shadows, in monsters and myths, in demons and devils, but not in dynasties, not in dollar signs, and not in those who declare themselves chosen while choosing corruption. But today, baby, we're not just cracking open the deception, we're peeling it layer by layer, and we're tracing the bloodlines, the banking lines, and the biblical lines. And by the end of this truth track, you're going to see with some clarity who's not really us, but pretending to be us, and why the world stays at war and who fuels it. What was actually mutated in the garden, and who's the modern day synagogue of Satan. And we're going to discover how both white folks and black folks have been played like pawns in the master level demonic deception. See, Revelations 2:9 makes it very clear, and the Bible never stutters. It says, I know the blasphemy of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are the synagogue of Satan. See, this is not just a speech. This is an unmasking. What if your whiteness was never meant to be a race, but a role? A costume worn by those needing a cover story for colonial conquest? And what if the real architects of oppression, the ones who control the currency, the courts, the culture, aren't even who they claim to be? I want y'all to pause. If so-called white people have been at war with each other for centuries, English versus French, Dutch versus Spanish, Catholics versus Protestant, riddle me this. Why did one class still rise above every conflict, untouched, unbothered, and rich after every war? What's the one thread that ties it all together? The financiers behind both flags. The bloodlines who changed their name, changed nations, and stayed in power. See, this isn't about hating white people. Y'all got it all twisted. This is about unmasking the puppeteers who engineered all people into pawns. This is about the ancient fingerprints still smudging the global stage. But I want to trace this trail. Let's walk back directly to the beginning, shall we? See, in Genesis chapter 2, verses 7, it says, and the Lord formed man from the dust of the ground. That's not ivory, sweetheart. That's not marble, and it sure enough isn't mayonnaise. That's molten mahogany, burnt bronze, baked earth, deep brown, not beige. And Lamentations 5 and 10 says, our skin was black as an oven. That wasn't symbolic. It was literal. The people of the book were black, culturally, geographically, and genetically. So let me ask you, how did Adam go from eating melanin to looking like a boy band member from the 14th century France? How did Yah's chosen one suddenly sprout feather bangs and porcelain noses in Renaissance art? Make it make sense. So here's how. They rewrote history, they repainted the pictures, and then they replaced the people. This wasn't just whitewash, it was a bloodline heist. And now it's time we trace the tampering, line by line, and reclaim what was rewritten. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky because some of you all want to hop, skip, and jump over the sections where the Bible talks about mutations and hybrids and heavenly betrayal, the ones that walk among us. Let's not just talk about sin, let's talk about the side effects. See, sin didn't just break spiritual laws, it cracked the genetic code. Genesis 6 and 2 tells us that the sons of God saw daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them as wives. So now hold up. These weren't heart-playing cherubs floating on a cloud. No, they were watchers, heavenly beings who fell not just in rank, but in restraint. And when they crossed that divine boundary, they didn't just breed trouble, they birthed hybrids, giants, elites who fed on empires like vampires in pinstripe suits, cloned chaos, beings that walk, talk, trade, but lack the breath of Yah. That's why in every movie they show you these things. Jude 1:6 tells us, and the angels which kept not their first estate. They left their post. And what came after wasn't humanity as God designed it. It was something entirely different. So when you look around and wonder why certain folks seem to lack empathy, why they can nuke a nation, drink baby blood, and still sleep soundly at night, maybe, just maybe, it's because they were never fully human to begin with. But I want to talk about how the Ashkenazi Jews rose to power with ports and prophets. I want to shift from the spiritual war to the shipping lanes. See, I want to give you all these receipts because it's important to have the receipts, right? See, I brought a whole filing cabinet for you. In Rudolph Windsor's book, Babylon to Timbuktu, he actually says the European Jews were the ship owners and some had stock in the slave ships. And in the book of Secret Relationships Between Blacks and Jews, Volume 1, it tells us that in virtually every slave-holding area of the New World, Jewish merchants frequently dominated it. Dr. Mark Lee Raphael also said Jews were majority of the slave traders. Did y'all hear that? Majority. So let me make this plain for you all. They weren't just slaveholders. They financed the voyages. Y'all hear that? They insured the cargoes. They owned the ports. They owned 75% of the slave ships. Y'all hear that? And yet, they hid behind faces of white Christians. Are y'all seeing it? They weren't the whips in the hand. They were the lenders behind the lash, the contractors behind the chains, the capital behind the colonizers. So no, white people didn't build white supremacy on their own. They were the foot soldiers. Now, I talk about this in my other previous videos, so if you haven't seen that video, y'all need to go back and look at that. But the foremen, the funders, the family offices pulling the strings, guess who that was? That was the Ashkenazi Jews, banking dynasties. And while they played the role of victim in public, they sat in the counting house calculating profits per person per pound of flesh. So tell me again, who really wrote the rules of this world? But I'm going to tell you who wrote the rules. Let's walk this one real slow because truth doesn't need to scream. It just needs to be shown. Who are the Ashkenaz really? I want to dismantle this illusion layer by layer. See, white supremacy isn't white led. It's white leverage. The real power brokers, names like Rothschilds, Rockefellers, Warburgs, Soros, men who didn't just play the system, they actually built it. Not as Semitic people, but as Khazars, Turkish converts who put on Judaism like a costume and called it a covenant. But let me break this down for you all, for the ones who don't read the Bible. Genesis chapter 10 verses 2-3 already tells you who these people are. They are the sons of Japheth, Gomer, Ashkenaz. Let that marinate. Ashkenazi Jews are not the children of Shem. That's where the term Shemite comes from. That's where the term Semitic comes from. They are Japhites from the line of Gomer, from the Caucasus Mountains. That's where you get your term Caucasian from. Author Kessler actually talks about this in his book, The 13th Tribe. He tells us that Ashkenazi Jews are not Semitic. They are descendants from Khazars, a Turkish people from the Caucasus Mountains. And that's where we get that term, Caucasian. The DNA doesn't lie. But I know people who do. See, modern geneticists, Oppenheim and others have confirmed it. The Ashkenazi Jews are not Semitic. I know some of y'all clutching your pearls right now, but honey, they are not Hebrews. They are not Shemites. They are the imposters that the Bible talked about. They are Turkish converts who militarized identity, monetized trauma, and weaponized the Holocaust as a spiritual smokescreen. See, Ezekiel chapter 38 warns us about Gog and Magog, enemies from the north. Where is the north from Israel? Russia? Ukraine, Georgia, the Caucasus. These weren't covenant keepers, y'all. They were political opportunists who saw an invasion coming and chose conversion over conquest, then claimed a birthright that never belonged to them. This is where the Bible talks about that the line of Japheth would dwell in the house of Shem. Shlomo saying the invention of the Jewish people. He talks about how Jewish identity has been used as a political tool. They adopted whiteness when it was convenient. Read that again. They became white when it worked for them. They became Jewish when it paid. And then they became victims when it shielded them from scrutiny. All the while, they pull the strings behind white faces, behind the media, behind the money, the front man, and the foot soldiers. But I'm gonna tell it like it is. White people didn't create white supremacy. They enforced it. They were the foot soldiers of Zionist imperialism, the front lines of colonial conquest, the cheerleaders of false Israel, and they still doing it today. The loudest accusers of anti-Semitism, but the same ones that are quiet when black bodies are bleeding in the streets. And they're certainly muted when Palestine babies were blown into pieces. So tell me, why is it a career suicide to question Israel, but a promotion to demonize black truth? See, Isaiah makes it clear in chapter 5, verse 20, woe to those who call evil good and good evil. Y'all scream, I stand with Israel, while Israel funds genocide. Y'all keep on calling Israel a place when it's actually a people. You wear Jesus on your t-shirts while backing a Zionist regime that crucifies his people. But Matthew 23:37 tells us, O Jerusalem, thou killest the prophets. I already know, here comes the pearl clutchers. But we do stand with Palestine. Sure you do, but let's be real. You only stand when Palestine looks like your cousin Becky. Light-skinned enough to make you care. Close enough to white for your conscience to click. Because let's not pretend. Because if they had melanin and had coils in their hair and wide noses, you would scroll past their suffering like it was yesterday's news. The truth is, your compassion is color-coded. And proximity to whiteness is the only passport to your protest. But you know, the media masks the hidden Hebrews. They show you pale-skinned Palestinians on CNN, but they hide the Afro-Palestinians who've been in Gaza, Hebron, and the Negev for centuries. See, Ezekiel 16:3 tells us, thy birth and thy nativity is of the land of Canaan. Thy father was an Amorite, and thy mother was a Hittite. This isn't just Middle Eastern land. This is black land. Hebrew land, Afro-Asiatic territory. But what did Western powers do? They redrew those maps. They rebranded the bloodlines, of course, like they always do, and they replaced people and called it prophecy. Well, let me take you on a time travel truth bomb, okay? It was the year 1869. Where? Location? Egypt. Agenda? Erase the evidence. Before this pivotal moment, there was no separation between Israel and Africa. Absolutely none. No Middle East, no false geography, no invisible border built on colonial lies. No, Israel sat firmly right there on the African tectonic plates, connected politically, culturally, and prophetically. It wasn't just next to Africa, it was a part of Africa. And enter Suez Canal, a man-made moat cut not just through the land, but through the legacy. So this wasn't just a simple shipping lane. No, it was a spiritual severance, a Freemasonic fracture, a colonial surgery designed to amputate the promised land from the motherland. And so I'm kind of sitting here asking, well, why? I know some of y'all trying to figure out the same question I had for years. Why did they do that? So they could whitewash the Hebrews. They wanted to disconnect the black bloodline. and then reassign the covenant to a counterfeit crew. I know. Some of y'all clutching y'all's pearls and spiraling like, but nobody taught me this in school. Not even my overpriced liberal arts college. Oh my Lord, what shall we do? Breathe, Becky. Breathe deeply, Becky. It turns out that your tuition didn't cover the truth. Just colonial curriculum and cap and gown. But let's talk about what funded this whole project. It's the usual suspects, because we know that the Suez Canal didn't build itself. It was bankrolled by the very same names we've traced through every global scheme: the Rothschilds, Ashkenaz financiers, and European colonizers. They didn't just fund trade routes, they funded identity theft. They profit off of movement, migration, and manufactured history. And just like that, poof, Israel was pushed into political purgatory called the Middle East. That's how it all came up, baby. A term that's not found in one single verse of scripture. Nowhere. But y'all running around talking about Middle East, Middle East. See, here's the difference with scripture versus Suez propaganda. See, Genesis 13:1 tells us, and Abram went up out of Egypt unto the south. So pause right here. If you go up out of Egypt, and I know some of y'all are geographically challenged, but you don't end up in Sweden. You don't land in a snow globe. No, you land in a brown-skinned, sun-kissed, melanin mighty land. This tells us one thing. Israel was always adjacent to Africa, okay? It wasn't Middle Eastern. That's a colonial myth, so y'all need to just let that one go. But let me ask you, why do Palestinians
This is all I got from this video, man. This sister always blow me away. I took my time, going through her comment section to also see what people are saying and all that. And trust me, majority of the people knew also what she was talking about. And the video, actually, I think that was where it ended, and there is another part which I will try and probably get also, because she was also asking why is it that each time they talk about Palestinian, and this is actually truth, like when they talk about Palestinians and what is going on in Palestine, right? Why is it that we rarely see the Afro-Palestinians? Because so far I only see the European, like the ones that look like European. Man, this history is something that is too deep that sometimes you are like, how did we get here? And like what she said, she talked about how in the Bible there is nothing like Caucasian or something, right? And it was something that was made up. And you all already know how whitewashed the history is also. And this is also one of the reasons why I told myself that the best I can do myself is just to be rooted in history. Because one thing I know for sure is that when you know your history, when you understand your history, there are some things you will not take for granted. There are some things you will want to avoid because you already know it. And I will also encourage people to also get to know their roots, know where they are coming from, how they started and all that. Because sincerely speaking, when you know yourself, when you understand yourself, when you know your root, when you know how you came, how your roots came about, there are some things you will never want to miss out on. And I mean, she is very intelligent. I don't know how she how she gained all this experience, all these experiences and all that. But trust me, I am going to say that she is very beautiful at the same time, very brilliant with her teachings and all that. And I am going to ask this: how did at some point, I know melanin, like she said that I mean, some people like melanin, which is true. How come all of a sudden, because so far you all already know that Black people are the real melanated people, and how did they come about? Where did they come from? I know actually, but sometimes I just don't want to say it, but it is what it is. So a very big shout out to Big Sister. I absolutely listened, I learned, and I am still going to learn more. I enjoyed her teaching, and Also, how she talked about the Egyptians, the Arabs, and wow, absolutely brilliant. Let me know what you all think in the comment section. I am going to draw the curtain here. I will see you all in my next video. Bye for now.